The flow of logic in an R script is controlled through the use of a variety of different control structures. Control structures are ways to create loops and branches in your R script that can be triggered based on certain conditions. The simplest form of control structure that one can find are if-else statements. Let's have a variable called credit score that has the value 675. In addition, let's have the following thresholds stored in variables. With good credit as values above 750, average credit between 650 and 750, poor credit between 550 and 650, and lower than 550 is going to give us bad credit. To evaluate whether the credit score of 675 falls within good credit, average credit, or poor credit, or bad credit, we can use if-else statements as follows. If the credit score is greater than or equal to the threshold for good credit, I can print out, in fact, I can cat out the credit score, the value of the credit score, is a good credit score. If the individual, on the other hand, does not meet that criteria, I can check if the credit score is greater than or equal to the threshold for average credit. And if it does fall within the threshold for average credit, I will tell the individual that their credit score is an average credit score. If the credit score is greater than poor credit, but less than the average credit, then I'll tell them that their credit score is a poor credit score. If it doesn't fall within these three criteria, I can have my last else, where I tell them that the credit score is a bad credit score. And so what this if-else statement does is it first checks if the credit score value is greater than the good credit threshold. If it is, then they will print out the credit score is a good credit score, and this entire block of code from lines 11 to 23 is terminated at right there. This is considered one conditional block, and as if the first condition is evaluated to be true and I pop inside the first set of curly braces, nothing else is evaluated, no other condition is evaluated. If, on the other hand, the first condition is false or is not evaluated, is evaluated to be false, then the second condition is evaluated. And the second condition is considered to be true. The cat within the curly braces is printed out and nothing else is further executed. If the first three conditions fail, the else is triggered. Let's see whether this successfully executes. I'll be selecting this entire block of code, and what I should see at the end of this is a statement indicating whether the credit score of 675 falls under good credit, average credit, or poor credit. I'm going to run this, and we see that the credit score of 675 is an average credit score. As you can see, there is nothing that is printed out after that, and so this entire block of code is considered one logical block. This is an example of how do you create branches or establish conditions in your code. Another type of control structure that we can use is so that we can perform iterative behavior in our scripts. Iterative behavior is executing a set of statements again and again till a condition is triggered that breaks out of the iteration. One of the ways we can create this iterative behavior is through the use of loops. The simplest form of loop is a while loop. In a while loop, you have to specify while and a condition within the while parentheses and a set of statements that we want to execute while the condition is true. This is the basic structure of a while loop. For a while loop to properly function, we need a couple of pieces of information. The first piece of information is initiating the loop. For instance, in this case, I'm going to have a variable called I whose value I'm setting to 1. The condition I'm going to be evaluating within the while parentheses is while I is less than equal to the value of 10. While I is less than equal to value of 10, I'm going to execute a set of statements. Set of statements I'm going to execute is I'm just going to print out what the value of I is. In fact, I'm going to cat what the value of I is. Now, the problem with this one statement inside of the loop is that I start off the loop by setting I is equal to 1, and the first go around of the while loop, 1 being less than 10, the value of I is printed out as 1 and continues to be printed out as 1 only, because that 1 value never changes. I is never changed, and the only way to trigger that condition, I being less than equal to 10, to be false is if I change the value of I within the loop. One of the ways I can change the value of I within the loop is, for instance, to increment I. I can say I takes the value I plus 1. I add 1 to I and I store it back in I. So the next go around, the value of I is set to be 2. And so when I reaches the value 10, I print out the value of I is 10. When it moves to 11, I terminate the loop. This condition evaluates to false and the loop ends. Let's run this and see whether this works. As you can see, I have the value of I is 1, the value of I is 2, the value of I is 3, so on and so forth, till the value of I is 10. One of the things that you're going to notice is that when I use cat, I don't really have a line break at the end. I really don't have a way to move to the next line. And so one of the ways I can do that is through the addition of what is known as a new line character. And so I'm going to use that, the \n, and the \n is representing a new line character, or basically the enter key at the end of the printout. And so let me run this once again. and I see that each statement is printed on the next line. One can use loops to do lots of interesting things. For instance, one can use loops to sum up numbers. And so let's say I have two numbers. I'm going to start off I with the value 1, and basically what I'm doing is again reinitializing I to 1, because notice at the end of this loop, the value of I should be 11, and you can see that in working memory, the value of I at the end of the first time this loop went around is 11, which is why the loop terminated. So I'm going to set up I equal to 1 once again, and I want to have a second variable called end called 10, and I'm going to say while I is less than the end or less than equal to the end, what I want to do is I want to sum up the numbers. Let's say I want to sum up numbers from I to n. So basically I want to sum up numbers from 1 to 10. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a third variable that I say holds this value 0. So I'm going to have a variable called sum that holds value 0. What I'm going to do is I am going to take sum, and to sum I'm going to add sum, the previous value of sum, plus I. So every time I goes up by 1, I'm going to add that value of I to sum and keep incrementing I. When I execute this, let's see what happens. Let's say I want to print out the value of sum at the end. I'm just going to have print and I'm just gonna go ahead and insert a new line at the end of that as well. And so if I select all of this code and run it, we see the value of sum of 1 to 10 is 55. And so finally the last value that sum holds is the number 55. So that is 1 plus 2 plus 3 all the way to 10.